Hello class, and welcome back to Let's Make Music. My name's Cody Hanna, and today we're going to do a slightly different video than what we usually do here on this channel because there's a lot going on in the fields of music and music theory right now that I think we really need to talk about. And that is that the tradition of Western music theory, and by extension the traditions of classical Western music, are pretty racist. Let me explain. As of 2019, 83.7% of the Society for Music Theory's membership self-identified as white, as well as 90% of all full-time employees in the field of music theory and 96% of full professorships. Despite efforts by the SMT to diversify over the past 20 years, only 3.7% of its membership self-identify as Black or Hispanic, and only 0.1% self-identify as Native American. And those numbers get even worse when we break them down further by gender identity or sexual orientation. So without even getting into how or why we got here, we obviously have a serious problem in regards to representation in the fields of music theory and music as a whole. So how did we get here, and why are straight, cis, white male voices so heavily overrepresented in the fields of music theory even today? Well, to learn about that, we have to know a little bit about the history of music and musicology, which goes back to about the 18th and 19th century. There's a really great video here on YouTube by 12 Tone called Beethoven Sucks at Music that dives a little bit more in depth into this history than I will in this video. I'll link that in the description so you can check it out. I really highly recommend it. Basically, a lot of what we learn and teach about Western music theory in academia comes from these two guys named francois-joseph and Heinrich Schenker, both of them being well-known composers, musicians, and theoretical musical thinkers of their times. The works of Fati and Schenker inform a lot of the way that we've gone about understanding Western tonal music and harmony, and on its surface, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. The fields of music theory and musicology as they are today wouldn't exist without them, and so I think we owe them at least a little bit for that. The problems arise, however, when we start to dig a little bit deeper into their thoughts about music and human cultures, and it gets really problematic. Let me just read you part of Fati's General History of Music, and I think you'll get what I'm saying. The black and yellow races have demonstrated their incapacity to reach that formation of music as a true and complete art. The true history of music only begins with the general history of that privileged white race, which never knew a savage state, a superiority so great in regard to the other races that no comparison among them can be made. So, yeah. Big yikes. It's pretty bad. Let me read you one from Schenker. Let the German people be guided by history and what history has to tell us through our superior thinkers, artists, and historians. Let them especially learn the lesson of the World War and so construct a true picture of the other nations, i.e. the Anglo-Saxons, the French, the Italians, the Slavs. Then they will discover that these peoples all lack power of creativity at the highest level of genius. Yeah. And unfortunately, that's not even really the worst of it. Now, to be fair, and I'm trying to be very fair here, this kind of thinking wasn't necessarily rare in the late 19th, early 20th century, but that doesn't make it okay, and I think it's a little bit disingenuous to believe that that kind of thinking had no effect on the work that they founded and the eventual culture of academia that came up around that work. So clearly, if those are your foundational thinkers for this discipline, and that's what they thought of anybody who wasn't a straight, white, and generally German male, we're obviously going to run into some issues with equity and representation in the field that they founded. And the question then becomes, in today, 2020, what do we do to fix this? Some people in the music theory world think that we should throw out their ideas entirely, and while I admire that commitment to fighting white supremacy, I don't think that that's really a viable option at this point, given the fact that we've come to teach and learn music theory and music as a whole from their ideas for over 150 years now, and that's going to take a really long time to unlearn. Others believe that we as a global community of musicians just need to do a lot more to uplift the works of non-white, non-male, and non-straight musicians and composers, and use their works instead of the typical Beethoven or Mozart or Brahms or what have you. And unfortunately, the problem with this is that we can do this all we want, and we should be doing this, but by the SMT's own demographics in this assimilationist approach to inclusion, it hasn't really done much to include people of color. Philip A. Ewell, an African-American member of the SMT and associate professor of music theory at the University of New York, had this to say about finding potential solutions to this problem. Solutionism is problematic because it usually frames the racism that is part of music theory's racialized structures as a disease that can be cured, rather than as a structure that needs dismantling. Of course, we should seek solutions to the problems created by our racialized structures, but we must also reframe how we understand race in music theory, which we cannot do if we rush to find solutions to problems we do not yet understand or even acknowledge. Only through examining our racialized structures and how they shape the field can we begin the process of deframing and reframing music theory's white racial frame. So I think I agree with Dr. Ewell in that there isn't one quick fix to a centuries-old problem of racism and racial power structures that exist in music theory as a field. I think this is going to take a lot of work on all of our parts to get over, and it's probably going to take a really long time, but I think that work is worth doing. I don't think that we need to necessarily cancel our foundational thinkers and just throw out the ideas that we've come to understand music with over the past 150 years, but I do think we need to recontextualize it and let people know of the not-so-great origins that they came from. So I think it's on us as a global community of musicians to not only be non-racist in the way that we study and practice our craft, but to be actively anti-racist and to continually challenge the white supremacist ideals that came from the people who came before us. And I think when we do that, and when we've done that for a long time, we might be able to see some actual equity and representation in our field. Thank you all so much for watching. Please check out Dr. Ewell's article in the description below. It's a really great read and really important for the times we're living in right now. Until next time, keep learning, keep practicing, and let's make music. Have a good one.